Imagine living in medieval Europe, a place where the streets were narrow. The air smelled of kitchen smoke, horses, and, well, everything else. Public baths, once bustling places, were closed for fear of disease. Soap was a luxury only afforded by the wealthy. Clean water was scarce, and the concept of a daily bath was virtually non-existent. Yet, amid the cold stone castles and tiny wooden houses, people found strange, sometimes extremely creative, ways to keep themselves relatively clean. How did they do it? The story of personal hygiene during this period will surprise, terrify, and maybe make you more grateful for your modern shower than ever. When we think of the Middle Ages, we often picture people in dirty robes, living in cities filled with flies and sewage. Movies and comics often portray this world as a place where people paid no attention to hygiene, did not bathe, did not wash their hands, did not brush their teeth, and took filth for granted. However, when we stop to consider historical documents, archaeological excavations, and the writings of monks, merchants, and even doctors of the time, a different picture emerges, more complex, more realistic, and also cleaner. In fact, medieval people, despite the lack of modern equipment, still tried to maintain personal hygiene to the best of their ability. They were not as indifferent to body odor or dirt as we might think. They bathed, they washed, they combed their hair, and they brushed their teeth, just in a very different way than today's standards. The Vikings, often labeled as the blonde barbarians, who raided the coasts of Europe, turned out to be one of the most hygienic peoples of the early Middle Ages. Items found in Viking graves include not only weapons and jewelry, but also a complete set of personal hygiene tools, razors, tweezers, combs, and most notably, ear scoops. That's right, ear scoops, small wooden or metal spoons, often worn around the neck as an accessory, suggesting they were a constant companion. They also used alkaline soaps to bleach their hair, making it lighter and less prone to lice. This was not only for hygiene purposes but also for aesthetic reasons. Platinum blonde hair was popular and a sign of class. A 13th century account even tells of Vikings' habit of bathing on Saturdays, combing their hair every day, and changing their clothes frequently, which made them captivate Saxon women, making many noble girls fall in love with them. Meanwhile, the Anglo-Saxons of the same period only bathed once or twice a year, a stark contrast. Imagine a medieval city like London with a population of 100,000. There were no closed sewers, no garbage trucks, no running water. The result? Every day, tons of household waste, mostly human waste, was dumped into the streets, gutters, or straight into the River Thames. People used potties in their homes and emptied them out their windows. Despite a 14th century law to curb dumping, the practice continued. People hoped that dung boats or garbage trucks would come and collect it, but when they didn't, free dumping returned. Some areas like Tower Hill became notorious for the stench so strong that it was unbearable for those living nearby. This wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a real danger, as lice, fleas and ticks carried diseases, including the Black Death. However, not everyone lived in squalor. Noble castles had guardrobes, a type of latrine built into the walls, allowing waste to fall directly into the castle's moat. The moat, originally used for defense, now doubles as an outdoor septic tank, but it's not hard to imagine the pungent smell that rises every summer. Contrary to popular belief, bathing was not completely neglected. King Edward III had his own tiled bathroom, hot and cold water, scented soap and servants to serve him. He also had a very special title, Groom of the Stool, which was the person tasked with disposing of the king's waste. For the middle class and the poor, they had to bathe in basins, or in rivers and lakes. But this was not safe. Many people drowned while bathing, such as 12-year-old John White in 1269. In 13th century Paris, there were more than 30 public baths where people paid to bathe. In London, the Southwark area once had 18 public baths. Some baths were built next to bakeries to take advantage of the heat from the furnaces. But gradually, the church began to regard communal bathing as an obscene act. Associated with prostitution, some bathhouses were closed, and the practice of bathing gradually became less popular among the common people. One of the reasons for the poor hygiene in the Middle Ages was religious beliefs. Many believed that pain and suffering were the path to salvation, so they refused to bathe, change their clothes, or wash their hair. St. Thomas Becket died, his clothes full of lice and fleas. Another bishop wore a Hessian, horsehair, coat so thick with lice that his servants could pick up a handful by picking it up. Some nuns, out of humbleness and purity, never washed their hair, leaving it full of lice as a prayer to God. In that context, trying to maintain hygiene was more courageous than lazy. Medieval women not only suffered from power struggles, but also from a severe lack of understanding of their own bodies. Menstruation was seen as Eve's curse. Pain was a punishment from God that was not relieved. Sanitary napkins? Non-existent. The poor used rags or moss, while those who had more means used cotton balls and washable towels. To reduce odor, women often carried small bouquets, nosegay, containing herbs such as nutmeg and lavender. Medical books such as Trotula recommended washing hair every 2 to 3 weeks with warm water mixed with ashes. Grape skins or egg whites, a medieval form of dry shampoo, was born. Looking back at the whole picture, we cannot deny that despite their ignorance of germs and lack of modern technology, the medieval people were not indifferent to hygiene. On the contrary, they tried very hard, bathing, washing, creating soapy water, building public baths, inventing grooming tools. It is the historical circumstances, religious extremism, church control, and limited technology that make hygiene in those times seem poor to us today. Instead of criticizing them, perhaps we should learn to appreciate their small efforts under harsh conditions. And ask ourselves, if we were them, without running water, without electric lights, without scented soap, how much better would we be? In modern times, it's easy to forget the fragility of seemingly ordinary things: a clean tap, a bar of soap, a roll of toilet paper, a bubble bath. These amenities were never taken for granted. They were the result of centuries of struggle, not just against germs, but against ideas, habits, beliefs, and poverty. There was no shortage of people in the Middle Ages who wanted to be clean, but often they weren't allowed to. When religion declared suffering a virtue, when society assumed body odor was inevitable, when death by water or the effects of poison were not well understood, being dirty was sometimes a safer way to live. And sometimes, dirtiness became a statement of faith, a way out for the poor soul trying to find its way to heaven. It was not the choice of the lazy. It was a compromise between what people knew, what they believed, and what they could do within the survival framework of the time. But in that same era, we see glimpses of another aspiration. Vikings combing their hair every morning, women adding lavender to their laundry detergent, public baths heated by toasters, ear-picking spoons worn around their necks like diligent jewelry. All of this speaks to a simple fact: people, regardless of time, have always gravitated toward cleanliness as a way to affirm their dignity and their survival. The Middle Ages had no concept of germs. They did not know that a single flea-carrying disease could kill millions. But they feared the stench. They knew the pain of lice bites. They knew the pride of combed hair, spotless clothes, and they acted according to their understanding, flawed, but never without effort. We, as modern people, should look back on that past with sympathy and gratitude, for it was the lessons learned in the dark, the deaths from dirty water, the poisonings from not washing our hands, the diseases spread by lack of hygiene, that propelled society forward. Those mistakes laid the foundation for sewers, preventive medicine, and microbiology. When we wash our hands, we are not just cleaning our skin. We are continuing history. We are whispering from the past, remember me. Be clean, not only for yourself, but for those who died because they couldn't. Cleanliness, then, is not just a physical matter. It is also a moral one. It is a form of respect for ourselves, for those around us, and for the tearful lessons of our ancestors. And the next time you stand in front of the mirror, toothbrush in hand, complaining about the stinging toothpaste, remember, there were people who used ash, urine, or twigs to do it, not because they liked it, but because they had no choice. They lived and died so that we could be clean. Thanks for joining me on this smelly, muddy, and instructive journey. If you find history boring, keep reading, where the past not only comes alive, but whispers in our ears every day.